Ethan never expected that a relationship could slowly reshape the way he breathed, spoke, and even stood in a room. What began as light teasing from Madison gradually turned into jokes that cut deeper than he dared to admit. He kept telling himself it was harmless, that love sometimes came wrapped in rough edges. But the truth was simpler and uglier. Every laugh at his expense chipped away a small part of him until he barely recognized the man in the mirror. Then one night, in a crowded room filled with people he needed to impress, Madison pushed a little too far. The humiliation burned hotter than anything he had ever felt. In that moment, something inside Ethan snapped in a quiet, steady way. He realized he was done being the punchline in someone else's story. And without saying a word, he decided the next chapter would be different. From the very beginning, Ethan noticed that Madison had a sharp tongue, the kind that slipped into every conversation whether it was needed or not. At first, he mistook it for confidence, a kind of bold humor that made her stand out. But as their relationship grew, that humor turned into something else entirely. It became a pattern, a habit, a reflex she didn't bother to control. She teased him about the way he dressed, calling his simple outfits safe picks for a man with no imagination. She joked about his job, saying he worked in a field anyone could do with one eye closed. When they were with friends, she poked fun at his quiet nature, saying he needed a personality upgrade. It stung more than he ever admitted. He would force a smile as everyone laughed, pretending not to notice how her words made his chest tighten. Whenever he finally gathered the courage to explain that the comments bothered him, Madison rolled her eyes like he was being dramatic. She told him he was too sensitive. She said he had to learn how to take a joke. She insisted that teasing was her love language. Ethan tried to believe her. He tried to convince himself that he was overreacting, that maybe he really did need to loosen up. But every time she dismissed his feelings, something inside him grew a little heavier. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the way she said them so casually, like she couldn't even imagine that he might feel hurt. It was the way she expected him to laugh along, even when the joke was at his expense. Her friends began to pick up on her behavior too. When they hung out together, she set the tone, and the others followed. They would snicker when she mocked his hobbies, or the way he organized everything neatly. They joked about how predictable he was, as if being stable was something to be embarrassed about. Ethan felt like he was shrinking in front of them. Like each comment pushed him further into a corner, he didn't know how to escape. He started speaking less in group settings, because anything he said seemed to turn into material for another laugh. He noticed that Madison rarely, if ever, stood up for him. In fact, she often encouraged the jokes, adding her own twist to keep the crowd entertained. He wondered if she even realized what she was doing. Or worse, if she did realize and simply didn't care. But every time he tried to address the issue, she flipped the narrative back onto him. She made him feel like he was the problem for not knowing how to laugh at himself. She dismissed his voice before he even finished speaking. Ethan began to understand that this wasn't lighthearted teasing anymore. It was disrespect dressed up as humor. It was belittling packaged as playfulness. And the more it happened, the more he felt himself fatting into someone he barely recognized. The breaking point came on a night Ethan had been preparing for weeks. His company was hosting a formal event, one where he would finally present his new project to the executive team. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come often, and he'd spent countless late nights fine-tuning every detail. He wanted everything to go right. He wanted Madison to be proud of him. When they arrived at the venue, Ethan felt a mixture of nerves and excitement buzzing under his skin. He hoped Madison would sense it too, and offer the kind of support he had seen other couples give each other. But as soon as they stepped into the crowded room, Madison slipped into her usual rhythm. She started with small comments, the kind that felt harmless on the surface. She joked about how stiff he looked in his suit. She teased him about practicing his presentation in the mirror. Ethan forced a smile because he didn't want to make a scene. He kept telling himself that once the presentation was over, things would calm down. But Madison didn't stop. As more people gathered around them, her voice grew louder, her tone sharper, her confidence swelling the moment she got a few laughs. She poked his arm and said he had probably rewritten his slides 20 times out of sheer panic. She said he was adorably anxious, using the word adorably as if that softened the sting. It didn't. Ethan felt the heat rising in his face. He tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Madison seemed determined to keep the spotlight on her jokes. She was performing now, feeding off the reactions, building momentum like she always did. When one of Ethan's supervisors joined the group, he silently hoped Madison would switch to a more supportive tone. But she didn't. She looked right at his supervisor and said, "Make sure to clap extra loud for him later. He's been practicing so much that I swear our neighbors think he's auditioning for a talent show." Laughter erupted around them. Ethan felt his stomach drop. This was the moment he feared most. The moment where his private insecurities became public entertainment. His supervisor gave a polite smile, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. Ethan saw it. He felt it like a punch. He realized Madison hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. The spotlight shifted back to him, and suddenly everything felt too bright, too loud, too humiliating. He excused himself and walked to the restroom, gripping the sink as he tried to steady his breathing. His reflection looked defeated. He wondered why he kept letting this happen, why he kept giving Madison the benefit of the doubt. As he splashed water on his face, a cold clarity settled in. Her behavior wasn't harmless. It wasn't just teasing. It was cruelty disguised as humor, and he had allowed it far too long. By the time he returned to the event, he knew something inside him had shifted. He wasn't going to absorb the blows quietly anymore. He wasn't going to laugh along to survive. If Madison insisted on living in a world where everything was a joke, then he would finally show her what that world felt like from the other side. Ethan began to fight back, but not with anger. He chose his moments carefully, turning Madison's own style of teasing against her. It started subtly. Small remarks designed to make her pause and think. At first, she laughed, assuming it was harmless fun, just like she always did. He commented on the way she overcooked eggs, calling her breakfast gourmet disaster, and watched as a faint frown crossed her face. He joked about her marketing ideas, calling them beige and safe, the same words she had once used to describe his work. He teased her driving, mentioning how she almost hit the mailbox 3 times on the way to lunch. For the first time, Madison hesitated before laughing. Ethan noticed it immediately, savoring the moment without gloating. He didn't escalate beyond small jabs, but he made sure each one landed with the precision of a well-aimed dart. The reactions of their friends were telling. Some chuckled, unsure if they should, while others looked at Madison with curiosity. She tried to brush it off, flipping a smile, but Ethan could see the cracks forming. It was subtle at first, the smallest shift in her expressions, the hesitation in her laughter. Then she started questioning herself. "Did I take it too far?" she asked quietly one evening after a comment about her new project. Ethan simply nodded, giving no hint of satisfaction. He wanted her to feel the tiniest fraction of what he had endured for so long. He didn't need her to apologize yet. He just needed her to understand. Every time Madison made a sarcastic remark, he mirrored it back, exaggerating it just enough to make her pause. He mimicked her tone, her timing, her confidence, the same confidence she had wielded to embarrass him countless times. It was a game of reflection, holding a mirror up to her behavior. Madison's defenses began to crumble. She became quieter around him, thinking twice before opening her mouth. Even with friends, she measured her words, noticing Ethan's presence in every conversation. For the first time, she felt the vulnerability he had carried silently for 2 years. Ethan didn't gloat or celebrate. He observed, patient, letting the lesson sink in. He noticed her discomfort, the brief moments when she tried to laugh, but her voice lacked its usual bite. She asked questions now, tentative ones about his feelings, his perspective, his boundaries. Ethan answered calmly, without anger, without drama. He was reclaiming his space, reclaiming his voice, asserting his dignity in the only way she had ever understood, through the language of teasing and public perception. It wasn't about revenge. It was about equilibrium. He wanted Madison to experience what it felt like to be on the receiving end, to recognize the weight of words carefully masked as humor. As the days passed, Madison's habitual jabs became less frequent. The energy between them shifted, charged with a subtle tension that had never existed before. Ethan finally felt seen, not as someone to laugh at, but as a person capable of holding his own. For the first time, Madison experienced the sting of the kind of teasing she had once wielded so freely. And in that quiet shift, Ethan discovered something he had longed for, respect born not from confrontation, but from reflection. The tension between Ethan and Madison reached its peak at one of Madison's company events. Ethan arrived knowing exactly what he was going to do, and he felt a calm determination he had never experienced before. He stayed close to Madison, observing her interactions, noting the way she flitted between colleagues, seeking attention and laughs. When the moment was right, he spoke softly, just loud enough for a few nearby coworkers to hear. He commented on her habit of missing deadlines, phrasing it as a playful tease, but the words carried the same weight she had used against him countless times. A small ripple of laughter spread through the group, and Madison froze, momentarily stunned. Ethan's timing was precise, mimicking the exact style she had perfected over years of practice. He added a joke about her forgetfulness in meetings, something she had always dismissed when others pointed it out. Madison's face changed in an instant. Her smile faltered, the laughter in her eyes dimmed. She tried to cover it up, forcing a chuckle, but the unease was unmistakable. Her colleagues exchanged glances, sensing a shift in the energy around her. For the first time, Madison felt what it was like to be the center of teasing she hadn't initiated. Ethan kept his tone light, never cruel, yet each word landed with the precision of years of observation. He didn't shout. He didn't attack. He merely reflected her behavior back at her, and the effect was immediate. Madison's usual confidence wavered. Her movements became cautious, her words measured. She looked at Ethan with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, almost to herself. Ethan remained calm, letting her question hang in the air. He could see her panic rising as she realized that the power she once wielded so effortlessly had shifted. She was vulnerable in a way she had never experienced with him. Her voice shook as she admitted, "I never thought my jokes that I was hurting you." Ethan simply nodded, allowing the weight of the truth to sink in. Around them, the room felt different. Colleagues who had once laughed at Madison's jabs now observed silently, sensing the gravity of the moment. Madison's eyes welled with tears, a mix of guilt, shock, and something else she hadn't felt before: accountability. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to reclaim her image, but the words caught in her throat. Ethan spoke softly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about showing you how it feels." Her breathing was uneven, her composure fraying as she processed the experience. For the first time, Madison understood that the laughter she had elicited at his expense had a cost. It wasn't fun or playful anymore. It was cruel, even if she had never intended it to be. Ethan stepped back, giving her space to process. He didn't gloat. He didn't lecture. He simply let the moment speak for itself. The evening ended with Madison quiet, reflective, and shaken. Ethan walked away with a sense of closure he had never felt before. He realized that sometimes, the only way for someone to truly understand the pain they've caused is to experience it themselves. And in that painful, silent lesson, the dynamic between them had irrevocably changed. After the events at Madison's company party, the dynamic between them shifted dramatically. Madison no longer held the upper hand in their interactions. She began to feel exposed, vulnerable, and unsure of how to navigate Ethan's newfound confidence. Instead of reflecting on her behavior, she chose a different path. She immediately went to her mother, recounting the evening with a mixture of tears and dramatization. She called friends late at night, sharing her side of the story and emphasizing how Ethan had supposedly hurt her emotionally. She turned to social media, posting vague statements about being mistreated, framing herself as the victim in every detail. Ethan discovered messages she had sent to her close friends, where she labeled him as boring and safe, while presenting herself as the wronged party. He felt a mix of anger and clarity as he read them. The realization hit him. Madison had never truly cared about his feelings. She only cared about maintaining her image and controlling the narrative. For weeks, she attempted to pull him back, sending texts filled with apologies and promises to change. She tried to make him feel guilty, to manipulate him into returning, to forget the hurt she had caused. Ethan remained resolute. He had seen through the pattern, recognized the cycles of behavior, and decided it was time to end the relationship for good. He didn't reply to her messages immediately, allowing the silence to reinforce his boundary. When he finally spoke, he was calm, firm, and unwavering. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I deserve someone who respects me, not someone who uses me as entertainment." Madison reacted with disbelief and frustration. She couldn't comprehend why her usual tactics, pleading, exaggerating, shifting blame, were failing this time. She escalated, calling repeatedly, sending long messages, attempting to charm and cajole him back. Ethan stayed grounded, repeating his decision without wavering. He realized that no apology or promise from Madison could undo years of emotional erosion. He understood that a relationship built on imbalance, mockery, and manipulation could not be repaired overnight. He began to detach emotionally, focusing instead on rebuilding his self-respect and clarity of mind. Madison, meanwhile, fell deeper into the role of victim, unable to accept responsibility. She painted Ethan as the aggressor to anyone who would listen, hopping to preserve her image. But those who had witnessed her behavior firsthand spoke up, subtly correcting the narrative, affirming Ethan's side of the story. Despite Madison's attempts to twist reality, the truth remained visible to those who mattered. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and sorrow as he walked away from the relationship. Relief that he would no longer endure constant belittlement. Sorrow for the time lost, for the emotional labor he had carried, and for the person Madison might never become. He reflected on the lessons he had learned. Respect cannot be demanded with words alone. It must be earned through consistent action. He understood the importance of setting boundaries early, of recognizing patterns before they become cycles of harm. Most importantly, he realized that ending a relationship doesn't mean defeat. It can mean reclaiming dignity and agency. By the time he finally cut ties, Ethan felt a sense of closure. He had protected himself, stood up for his own worth, and refused to be a pawn in someone else's game. For the first time in years, he could breathe freely, knowing he had made a choice that honored his values and his heart. After the breakup, Madison plunged into a cycle she seemed unable to escape. She moved through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally projection, blaming Ethan for everything that had gone wrong. She told anyone who would listen that he had emotionally abused her, that he had been cruel and unfair. She posted online about the toxic ex who had ruined her happiness, crafting a story where she was the innocent victim. At first, Ethan felt a sting reading some of the comments from mutual friends and acquaintances. But as the days passed, he began to see a pattern, the same pattern he had witnessed throughout their relationship. Madison was deflecting responsibility, trying to control perception rather than facing the truth of her actions. He realized that this behavior was not new. It was simply the next phase of the same cycle that had caused so much tension between them. Ethan watched from a distance as she attempted to manipulate social narratives, painting herself as wronged while omitting the ways she had undermined him for years. He noticed that those who had been present during the relationship, who had witnessed Madison's teasing and disregard for his feelings, quietly defended him. He felt a measure of reassurance, knowing that the truth had not been lost, that impartial observers could see what had really happened. Ethan reflected on the lessons he had learned during and after the relationship. He understood that some people enjoy putting others down, but cannot tolerate the same treatment in return. He realized that the world does not always reward patience and tolerance. Sometimes, it rewards self-respect and the courage to set boundaries. He began to rebuild his life, focusing on his own well-being, hobbies, and work, reconnecting with friends who had been supportive all along. He allowed himself to grieve the relationship, but he did not dwell on the anger or resentment. Instead, he learned from it. Ethan noticed the subtle ways Madison continued her patterns with others, a reminder that her behavior was a reflection of her choices, not of his worth. He understood that some lessons are best learned through experience, and some people will never change unless they choose to. Through it all, Ethan maintained his sense of empathy, recognizing that Madison's cruelty stemmed from her insecurities and need for control. He chose not to retaliate or engage in further conflict, knowing that doing so would only prolong the emotional drain. Ethan saw the contrast between the life he had endured with Madison and the life he was now building, free from constant mockery and emotional manipulation. He realized that respect and kindness are not negotiable, and a healthy relationship requires mutual understanding, not constant one-sided entertainment. As he reflected, he felt a quiet sense of closure and empowerment. He had survived the relationship, reclaimed his dignity, and learned how to protect himself emotionally. Ethan understood that karma does not need intervention. It manifests naturally when people continue on the paths shaped by their choices. He felt gratitude for the clarity he had gained, and a renewed determination to enter relationships where respect and love were mutual. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt truly free, confident that he could recognize toxicity early and choose a path that honored his values and emotional health. He carried forward the lesson that boundaries are essential, that self-respect is non-negotiable, and that personal growth often comes from surviving the challenges others impose. Time passed, and Ethan found himself stepping into a new chapter of life. He met Sophie, someone who valued him, respected his boundaries, and appreciated his presence without diminishing it. With her, laughter was shared, not aimed, and conversations felt safe and nurturing. Ethan noticed the contrast immediately. He no longer felt the tension that had defined his past relationship. Madison, meanwhile, continued her cycles, repeating patterns that had already caused pain, unaware that consequences follow actions in ways she could not control. Ethan observed from a distance, feeling no anger, only clarity and relief. He realized that sometimes, people don't change until life teaches them lessons naturally. He embraced the peace he had earned through patience, self-awareness, and the courage to walk away. In Sophie's company, Ethan discovered joy that was free from manipulation and mockery. He cherished mutual respect and genuine connection, understanding that love should uplift, not humiliate. Looking back, he acknowledged the growth that came from hardship and the lessons learned about self-worth, boundaries, and emotional resilience. Ethan understood that karma does not require intervention. It unfolds in time, and integrity eventually finds its balance. He smiled quietly, knowing that he had stepped into a life where respect and kindness were constants, and he carried forward the confidence to protect his heart while embracing love that was real.